In this class, we are going to explain what St. Augustine says about the world. And let's start things off by talking about creation. St. Augustine says that creation happened, out of nothing, and it happened by a God's free act. And as we are going to see right now, this is very original in the philosophical tradition. Very original because Plato stated that God's emanation, the world is emanating from God. There is a pre-existent chaos there, and after that, the existence of that chaos, the craftsman introduces order in that world so that we see the world and the order and the beauty of nature and the laws of nature, etc. Because this craftsman, which is smart and has a spark of God, and he can see the ideas better than us, he modelated this world according to those ideas. But again, that craftsman was introducing order in the pre-existent chaos, and that pre-existent chaos comes from God's emanation. Okay, that's basically what Plato says about the world. Then there is Plotinus in the Neoplatonism tradition, Neoplatonic tradition, and he highlights the same ideas than Plato. He says that the world emanates from God. God is so perfect that he cannot stop emanating, and he speaks about necessitate nature. This happens because of the nature of God. God is so perfect that he has to emanate being. The good diffusing itself. The world is a product, the result of the good diffusing itself. And we know very well that these two positions have two problems. First one, there is no free creation. According to Plato and Plotinus, God didn't decide to create. It's just that God cannot stop creating. And on the other hand, there is this problem that the fact that if the world emanated from God, then there is no distinction, there is no real distinction between God and his creation. There is no line we can draw to separate what is creation or what is God. So these are the problems that were coming from ancient philosophy, and St. Augustine said the opposite. So St. Augustine said, creation is out of nothing and by God's free act. And he explained these things, by identifying what we read in Genesis 1:1 with unformed matter. So for St. Augustine, what we read in Genesis 1:1, at the beginning God made heaven and earth. For him, this heaven and earth is unformed matter which God made out of nothing. Okay, and that's called by St. Augustine primary creation. So the first thing God did, he called it primary creation, and it's about this unformed matter. One of the things that St. Augustine explains when he talks about the world is these rationes seminales, or seminal reasons, which are invisible powers or germs of things created by God at the very beginning, which were called to develop into the objects of a species by their temporal unfolding. Okay, this is the definition that St. Augustine gives us about these seminal reasons. And St. Augustine is taking up something that Plotinus talked about, and Plotinus took it up from the Stoicism, who spoke about logoi spermatohoi, those matter with some intelligence and capacity of developing in time. The main feature of these invisible powers or germs of things is they are active, and they tend to self-development of form according to divine plan. Okay, it's like God created some matter without a form, and this is consistent with what St. Augustine says, that at the very beginning, what God created out of nothing was unformed matter, and then those things were created with power to develop, to unfold, and later on time. That's the explanation of these seminal reasons. Why did Augustine have to talk about these things? According to Copleston, is because of an exegetic problem. It wasn't due to a scientific problem. And here is the thing. In the book of Ecclesiasticus, we read that God created all things together. But in the book of Genesis, we read that the birds, for instance, were created on the fifth day. which suggests that there were steps in creation. And St. Augustine tried to combine together an explanation of everything was created from the very beginning, out of nothing, and then these steps that are suggested by the narrative in the book of Genesis, narrative of the creation in the book of Genesis. So that's why St. Augustine came up with this explanation of the seminal reasons. It is interesting to note that St. Thomas Aquinas rejected this theory. One of the themes St. Augustine deals with in his vision of the world is numbers. This theme goes back to Pythagoreanism and down to Platonic number theme, and of course St. Augustine has a word on it. And here is the thing. St. Augustine considers that God is the one. Okay, this is the starting point. God is the one. It is important to realize that he looks on numbers as the principle of order and form, the principle of beauty and perfection, and the principle of proportion and law. What does that mean? It means that the closer something is to the one, to number one, which is God, the more order and better form that being has. Okay? The closer you are, or that some being is, to the one, more beauty and more perfection. And the closer you are to the one, more proportion and law. So this is the way that St. Augustine sees order in the world, and different beings have different numbers depending on their constitution and depending on their closeness to the one. Okay, we'll see something about it now. For St. Augustine, for instance, ideas are eternal numbers. Okay, and bodies are temporal numbers which unfold themselves in time. Let us study one example. A plant. A plant is a whole, okay, so there is a unity there. And this whole, is a whole consisting of a number of parts. And this whole, it unfolds in successive stages. Okay, first it germinates. 2, it breaks into leaf. 3, it produces flower. 4, it produces fruit. And finally, 5, it seminates. So this plant, this body is a temporal number, and it unfolds itself in time, and there is those stages which talk to us about the imperfection of this being. Okay, so again, the farther you are from the one, you are less beauty and less perfect. This is the way St. Augustine explains all these things. It is important to point out here that there is, for St. Augustine, mathematical number versus metaphysical number, which means the mathematical numbers, or the series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., in which there are perfect numbers, imperfect numbers, etc. Well, that mathematical number is different than the metaphysical number. Okay, the mathematical number helps us, for instance, to see the stages, in which this plant unfolds, and it gives us number 5. Okay, so number 5, mathematical number, is telling me about the composition of the being. Okay, but that's not exactly the same than the metaphysical number. Metaphysical number is the properties that being has from the metaphysical point of view, etc. Okay, so mathematical number different than metaphysical number. One of the things that St. Augustine says is that man is the peak of the material creation. Okay, so for him, man is an important thing to study, an important topic, an important theme, and he says that man has a body and an immortal soul. For St. Augustine, the immortal soul of man is what is important, because he defines man as a rational soul using a mortal and earthly body. So for him, the important part is soul. And here we see an important influence of the Platonic philosophy in St. Augustine, of course. And, well, this is not surprising, because as we studied in previous classes, when we studied knowledge in St. Augustine, he says that the first way we get to know things is through sensation. Sensation is a movement of the soul using an organ of the body so that it can know something about the world. For instance, position, sensations, tact, these kind of things. It's the soul moving the organs of the body and getting to know space, etc. But it's the soul, the one which is receiving knowledge with those movements. And finally, St. Augustine says a few things about immortality. Immortality, of course, of the soul. And here is the difference between Plato and Augustine. Plato thinks that the soul is immortal because it apprehends, it is capable of apprehending ideas which are eternal and indestructible. So if the soul is capable of apprehending these ideas, it must be immortal. Plus, according to Plato, the soul pre-exists to the body. And due to a punishment in a pre-earthly condition, the soul was thrown down to the earth, to this body, So the soul is not created, according to Plato. It pre-exists to the body. And then it goes from one body to another, etc. So this is what Plato said. According to St. Augustine, the soul is immortal because it desires perfect happiness. So in that sense, he thinks that, well, the soul is able to desire perfect happiness. So the soul desires somehow God. That's why it's immortal. So the perspective is totally different. And of course, according to St. Augustine, the soul is created. Let's say a few things about the creation of the soul. According to St. Augustine, all the souls were created in Adam. This theme, the vision of St. Augustine, the vision of St. Augustine regarding this theme goes back to the fact that creation happened at the very beginning, at the same time, everything. So all the souls somehow must have been created at the very beginning in Adam. He explains that it is in Adam that all the souls of all men and women in the world were created. And he is inclined to follow traducianism, which is this explanation about the transmission of the soul also through natural generation. So when a baby is conceived, the soul is also given there, which is not a clear explanation, but St. Augustine is inclined to follow this traducianism theory about the transmission of the soul down to one generation, to one person to another. But of course, he was always against a materialistic view of the soul. That's clear. For him, the soul is spiritual and immortal, etc. So, yeah. And finally, let us say a few things about the different kinds of souls we can find in this world. And basically, according to him, there are two: beasts, which have sensation, or humans. Remember, sensation is that movement of the soul through one of the organs of the body, and by doing that, the beast, the human, get some knowledge about something, distance, space, feelings, whatever, sensations. Okay, beasts. Humans have that sensation plus reasoning plus knowing. So there is something interesting here. The more you reason, the more you study, the more you get to know things, the more knowledge you get, because the more you connect ideas, etc., then your knowledge can improve. So from the sensation to knowing, there is 3 steps there, and this is the difference between the souls of beasts and humans.